Hello all, Rick here and welcome to the Index series where we look into the lore behind a science fiction species to get a sense of their world, tech, culture and whatever else makes them them. So, after the vote off the back of last video, we have the Star Wars species, the Zygerrians. As this is a Star Wars one, I will be looking into the canon first and foremost before looking into some Legends material to flesh them out a bit, but I will mark it out as such where applicable. So, context provided. Let's look at these ones. The Zygerrian biology is rather humanoid for the most part, but they actually appeared in Legends before they turned up on screen. In Legends they looked rather different, but some legacies of that design were carried over to their canon depiction, notably the possession of horns along the jawline of males and the temple of females. Their fur and skin colour varied in shades of peach, tan, brown to purples, indigos and even more blues. The fur tended to be a shade or so darker than their skin and varied in length, fading from a fine fur around the face. Their eye colours covered an equally wide range of greys, greens, blues and yellows, the latter two being far more common. Aside from this, their height, weight and lifespan were all equatable to humans. So, despite their decidedly feline appearance, more or less, they were actually redesigned to appear more like a coyote, with prominent ears trying to capture the creature's look to evoke its cunning and conniving nature. Their home planet is Zygerria, grid S4, in the Trollane sector of the Outer Rim, and like many Outer Rim territories, this historically afforded them much cover from the prying eyes of powers like the Republic and later the Empire. For a time. Their planet was a terrestrial world of plains, highlands, canyons, and most prominently, mesas. It was atop these outcrops of brown rock that Zygerians built their cities and most settlements since their ancient times. This provided an obvious advantage when it came to viewing their surroundings, but building atop such a structure is far from easy work before the intervention of gravity lifts and spaceships, so how did they achieve this? Slaves. They did the slavery, and a lot of it. Their entire history can be attributed to the use of such labour, and it was a practice that they carried into the stars when they left their world. It was all based on their philosophy, which is quite simply that strength and intelligence naturally dictate a creature's place in an ecosystem, and therefore they are the most natural forms of establishing a hierarchy. If they are capable of enslaving you, well then it's only natural that you serve them. Unsurprisingly, this focus on domination left no room for compassion or mercy, with such approaches being seen as a weakness in themselves as much as others. Basically, they respected strength, willpower and resolve, but saw it as perfectly acceptable to challenge this and break it. They built their empire on slavery for thousands of years, and their territory expanded from their system, from Argazada to the Salin Hyperlane, and they also seized control of numerous trade routes, including the pass closest to Ryloth, the homeworld of the Twi'lek. They did much to cultivate their reputation as ruthless and efficient slavers, as it worked to shake the morale of planets or colonies upon which they descended. This continued until the Galactic Republic finally intervened and went to war with them, enforcing its outlaw of slavery. I couldn't find the exact dates for this conflict, but the Jedi were involved at the height of their power, so it was probably during the age of the High Republic, and was within the lifetime of Jedi Master Yoda. The Zygerrian Empire was near entirely focused on the efficient trade, auction and use of slaves, so this crippled their culture. By 20 BBY, the era of the Clone Wars, they had been reduced to only their home system. However, while they openly complied with the rules of the Republic by this time, they simply took their trade underground, maintaining slaving operations and rings with connections to crime syndicates, such as the Hutt Cartel. It was no surprise then that when the Clone Wars broke out, they allied with the CIS in order to openly practice their slave trade once more. In fact, they very easily resumed the practice without skipping a beat, almost as if they'd never really stopped. The long-term goal was to rebuild their empire to the height it had once been, but there were several obstacles in their way, not just the Republic, Jedi and rebellions, but their choice of allies too. Although their operations were crippled again by the Republic during the Clone Wars, it persisted into the age of the Empire. By the Imperial era, they ended up attempting to expand during the chaos of the regime change and they did expand their territory once more, taking several more worlds through conquest and then the enslavement of the native populace. However, the Empire then descended upon them, not for a moral stance, although I'm sure that is what the propaganda painted, but because the Empire would not tolerate a rival powerful enough to oppose it, and Zygerria at its prime could have been just that. They were again forced back to Zygerria, where a treaty was forced on them, which led to the official recognition of the Zygerrian Slavers Guild and the use of slavery within the Empire through its legal loopholes. Among many outposts and colonies, they had a base set up on Koak, where the monkey lizards are from. Their government was a monarchy. A king or queen would rule and then decide law for her people, as well as contribute to the ongoing campaigns and operations of their empire. However, they had a prime minister at their side who was the second in command and oversaw the daily affairs of governance. This made up the royal house as well as the regent's extended family, who resided in the palace on Zygerria. It is not known if this was always the case, but in the only instance we see, the prime minister was also captain of the royal guard. The technology they employed was also geared towards slavery. Many of their weapons were designed to hurt or incapacitate rather than kill, such as their electro whips and shock collars, and even their distinctively styled blasters. They would never waste the opportunity to enslave over elimination. Their military was seemingly folded in with their slave trade, with high-ranking officers also a part of those organisations. Their armour consisted of a lightweight body piece, gauntlets and a helm. The more gold inlay, patterns and piping the gear had, the higher rank the officer. Their fashion was generally made from pastels and washed-out colour schemes, which made any jewellery and other adornments stand out, with a strong favouring towards gold accessories. Preferred slaves were also decorated in finery for the richer members of Zygerrian society, a display of wealth most likely. Again, as with most Star Wars species, their technology, fashion and architecture is often laced with other worlds' influences. Due to the length of time most species have been interstellar in the Star Wars mythos, so it was not uncommon to see Zygerrians in any style clothing or brandishing CIS technology from their time as allies. There were also Zygerrian Jedi, which of course there were. The Jedi don't discriminate when finding candidates, but I can only imagine the insults hurled the way of the Jedi who took the Force-sensitive infants from the Zygerrians, who already despised the Jedi as ancestral enemies. Their architecture is tall, imposing and geometric, with heavy, seamless stone facades, complete with hard-edged, chiselled stone patterns and painted designs. The technology was designed to follow this angular design scheme, leading to a very distinctive look. Behind the scenes, it was all inspired by the Babylonian Empire, and comparing images of reference to Babylonian architecture, you can clearly see the similarities. Many important buildings resemble ziggurats, making for a fun phrase of Zygerrian ziggurats, which sounds like a curse. So, the Zygerrians are ruthless, and a good example of why a monolithic single adherence to a way of life is a bad idea. Their whole empire was based on a single trade, which led to its heavy collapse when the Republic ended it, let alone it being based on slavery, which is fraught with its own issues and ignores morality. The creed amounted to, if I can enslave you, well, you deserve to be enslaved, and this cutthroat behaviour forces them to abandon empathy even among their own. Notably, they did not take too kindly to their authority being challenged, seemingly ignoring the fact that their philosophy left room for they themselves to be overthrown and controlled. There's always a bigger fish after all. Although some can break the mould, they often do so solely outside the confines of their society. Thanks for watching this video on the Zygerrians of Star Wars. The next votes for the index are over on the community tab, so you can leave a vote there or suggest another species to look into. The choices I picked from the bucket list this week are the Hannah of Mass Effect, because this one wanted to do a nicer species, or sticking with the Star Wars theme, the Duros, because I've just watched through all of Bad Batch and was reminded of one of my favourite characters. Thanks again for watching. I've been Rick, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.